Next, two definitions that I want to go over are under Objective B, which is degree and neighbor. So a neighbor means that a particular vertex has an edge to another vertex. So in this case, this nice little graph that I drew up here, you'll notice that U and V are neighbors because they have an edge in between them. All right? And you can also see, well, U and W also have an edge in between them. So U and W are also neighbors, but V doesn't have an edge to W, so they're not considered neighbors. All right, so a neighbor of a particular vertex, let's say V, has that neighbor U if UV is an element of the edges in that graph. So now that we know what the definition of neighbor is, we can now talk about the definition of degree. So I pointed out, hey, U and V are neighbors, U and W are also neighbors, and so what you might say is, well, U has two neighbors, and in other words, it has a degree of 2. All right, so the degree of a particular vertex, say U, the degree is the number of neighbors. Okay, so the degree of a certain vertex is going to be the number of neighbors that it has. And now that we know what neighbors is, and now that we know what degree is, there's just one more little fun fact that I can show you here, which in this case, remember, we have a graph, which based on our previous objective, we learned that graph just means a set of vertices and a set of edges, which in this case with graph means that they're undirected. And so what I can do is I could actually do a sum over the degrees of the vertices. And these vertices are in the set that I talked about in the original graph. And I can go through them. I can say, well, how many neighbors does each one of these vertices have? All right, so in the case of U, it's got 2 neighbors, and X has 2. So if I go through and I sum all of these up, 2 plus 2 plus 4 plus 2 is 10, plus 1 is 12. I get a total of 12 is the sum of the degrees of the vertices. All right, and one thing that you'll notice is kind of cool is, well, let's go through and count the number of edges. So there are 6 edges. And so what turns out to always be true is the sum of the degrees of vertices in a graph is always going to be twice the total number of edges that are in that graph. So in this learning objective B, we talked about the definition of degree and neighbor. The degree of a vertex V is the number of edges in the graph that have an edge to that vertex V. 2 vertices U and V are considered neighbors if UV is an edge in that graph.